Hi there everyone, and welcome to the Novel Strip Show, where I talk about books and comics. What I thought I'd do today is the Booktube Newbie Tag. So I have been making videos for a while, but the other day I saw Jackie from Leisure Reads doing the Booktube Newbie Tag, and thought it was a great idea. So yeah, I thought I'd go ahead and do it, and I'll link Jackie's video in the description, so please do check that out. So the first question here is, why did you start a Booktube channel? So I started doing the 50 book challenge in 2017 after I decided that reading was something I wanted to get into more. I'd always struggled with it, and I was just decided that I wanted to give it a try. So my friend Vicky suggested doing the 50 book challenge in 2017. I did it, found I absolutely loved it. And then whilst I was doing it, I was kind of wanting more book suggestions. So I asked some friends, but then I wondered if there might be anything on YouTube, and that's how I kind of fell into BookTube completely by accident. I actually started watching Kitty G's channel first, and I really, really liked it, so I'll link that as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed her videos. Then some other YouTube videos as well kept popping up, so I kept watching them and found I really enjoyed it. Then one day I was reading one of my Soulfire comics, and I didn't really understand where it fitted in the whole chronology of the series. And yeah, I was just all a bit confused by the whole reading order for the series, because it had been a while since I'd collected it. I started collecting again after a while, and didn't have the knowledge of how it fitted together, and I couldn't find it anywhere online. So I decided that I was going to make my own. So I made my own, and just kind of had it as a list, and I was wondering whether I should publish it somewhere. And then what happened is I basically had a kind of bit of a breakdown. So I wasn't really enjoying work at all, and I'd kind of suffered from depression for a while, but it got to the point where I definitely needed to seek help. So I did, and that's all fine now. But what kind of came out of the therapy sessions there was that I wasn't really getting what I wanted out of life in terms of enjoyment and fulfillment. So I worked out that the main things that give me enjoyment and fulfillment out of life is obviously socializing with friends and relationships as such. But in terms of other things, it's kind of mainly creative things, so singing, drawing, writing, and reading. In terms of the first three, so singing, drawing, and writing, they're things that I have to kind of write and do actively and produce myself, and I often struggle with that because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I'm kind of like, well, if it's not going to be perfect, there's no point doing it. But obviously that's completely wrong attitude, because what I'm trying to get into the frame of mind that I'm trying to get into now is that I get enjoyment by doing them. So if I just enjoy the action of doing them, I don't need to think about the finished product, because if I do and worry about it being perfect or not, one, I'm never going to improve, so it can eventually be to a standard that I'm happy with, and two, I'm just going to never be able to achieve it. So even when I do them, I'm not going to get the enjoyment that I want out of them. And yeah, that's something I'm definitely working on. I think I'm getting a lot better at it. But in terms of reading, that was kind of the odd one out, because that was something that I could always more or less do. Like, I fall into reading slumps, as I'm sure everyone does. But reading's quite something that I've been consistently able to enjoy. So I wondered if I could combine that with something creative. And I decided that I could make a BookTube channel, and talk about books. And yeah, I decided that I would start with reading orders for Soulfire and Fathom, because I couldn't find them online anyway. I thought it would be a great creative way to get the information out there. And then I just decided I would go on to books as well, do reviews and wrap-ups, etc., to kind of make me think a bit more proactively about the books that I read, think more critically about them. And I really, really enjoy it. Most of my friends who like reading are in London, so it gives me that outlet to discuss literature without having them here. Second question, what unique things can you bring to BookTube? So as I mentioned, I have done the comic reading orders for series that I wasn't able to find. So I think that's quite unique. Obviously, no one's ever done them. That's why I put them out there. The other thing I think though is that pretty much every booktuber whose videos I've watched discuss how they've always loved reading. They've, were a bit of an outcast as a child because they were really bookish and no one else around them was. I wasn't like that. I never really read as a child, and reading something that I always struggled with. But basically, I went from reading probably 3 books a year for pleasure to now I read 50 a year. In fact, last year I managed to read 72. This year, I'm hoping that I'll read over 50 as well. So yeah, I always struggled with reading. For my degree as well, it was French and Spanish. I weighted it as heavily as I could towards linguistics and scientific study of language rather than literature, because I always found reading fiction a struggle. And since graduating, I've just had a complete turnaround. So hopefully that will, be an inspiration to people who have always struggled with reading as well, but wanted to get into it. It is perfectly possible, and I'm kind of proof of that. But I don't really see that coming out much on Booktube, going from not reading anything to reading loads and really enjoying it and overcoming the barriers that kind of stop me. So yeah. Also, I when I started the 50 book challenge, that was last year in 2017, and I didn't really document it. I put everything on Goodreads, but other than that, I didn't really think about my reactions to the books in too much detail or anything. So now I have my retroactive wrap-ups, as I've deemed them, where I look back to last year and see how my opinions of books has changed since I read them, and I've not seen any other booktubers doing that yet. So yeah, hopefully that's something quite unique. It's really interesting for me because I know that when I was at school, when I had to read Lord of the Flies, for example, I never really enjoyed it particularly. I didn't really get into it, and just last month I listened to the audiobook and absolutely loved it. So I've definitely changed a lot as a person, and that's reflected on, that's reflected in how my opinions of books have changed. Even, between this year and last year, I think I have changed a bit, and certainly my opinions of books have as well. So for me, it's very interesting documenting that. Hopefully it is for people watching it as well. Question 3, what are you most excited for starting this channel? So obviously I've already started it. What I'll discuss is kind of more what I actually get out of it and why I continue and what I enjoy and like. So in terms of the whole process of making videos, I like that it makes me think more critically about the books that I've read. I feel like part of not feeling satisfied in life is that I don't really have any intellectual stimulation, which I've always had previously when I was at school or uni. And so it gives me that that critical thinking element that I lack elsewhere. And yeah, also people who know me often know I like reading. They'll come up to me and ask for book recommendations, or ask why I like certain books, etc., why I don't like certain books. And before, I would never really have anything to say. I was just like, oh yeah, I like that. I don't really know why I liked this bit. I don't know, I liked that she had blue hair or whatever. Just, something that wasn't really particularly in depth or well thought out. Whereas now, if people come and ask me, hopefully anyway, I'll be able to give a more satisfactory answer, because making videos encourages me to think about things whilst I'm planning the video. Once I've done that, then I, as you can probably tell, quite like talking because I always ramble on for ages. But then once I've actually made the audio, I like the, sort of creative process of putting everything together. The whole point is that it is something that I can do very, very quickly, which is why I don't, have animation or amazing editing or even, show my face. But what I think I've reached a balance of being able to do it very, very quickly, but at the same time, having that kind of creative outlet and going through the process of putting everything together. And as I said as well, it's a way to share books with friends who don't live nearby. So yeah, that's brilliant. Question 4, why do you love reading? So as I said, I always found it a struggle when I was younger and never really read. However, I was always incredibly imaginative. I was always daydreaming and imagining things. I was an only child, but that never really mattered to me because I could imagine, 100 other people to play with. And yeah, when I was younger, any kind of stimuli, I didn't even really need anything to stimulate my imagination, but if there was anything, it would be TV shows, cartoons, comics, art, drawings, things like that. So very, very visual. And then as I got older, I still kind of daydream quite a lot, but it's never quite as fantastical. It's never, quite the same. And I always feel guilty when I'm doing it. I feel like as we do grow older, we're encouraged very much to be rooted in the supposed real world. And imagining things and fantasizing about things is seen as something negative, which I don't think it should be, but I think that has definitely happened, and therefore I've lost a bit of myself. And yeah, I feel like when I mean, I've stopped watching TV now. I don't have a TV in my flat. For a while, I didn't even have the internet either. So I do have the internet now. Sometimes I'll watch series, but I'm not really. There's not really anything that inspires me too much on in terms of TV series, and I've never really been into films either. So yeah, reading was kind of then something to do, but I found that it stimulated my mind in such a way that it hadn't been stimulated for ages, and it definitely feels like I'm regaining a part of myself that I've lost. And also as well, especially when I'm in moments where my real life isn't the best, isn't the happiest, I can be transported to another world where and just be completely absorbed in that. So yeah, that's why I love reading. The next thing then, so when did you start reading? Sorry, this is question 5. When did you start reading, and what books/series got you into reading? The first book that I ever remember reading and being really, really into and unable to sleep until I finished it was actually Matilda. So I would have been fairly young, I believe still in primary school. Yeah, after that, I kind of then, that didn't spur me into reading. I read it and I was really into it. But then I can't remember having that experience again with a book until the 6th Harry Potter book came out. So yeah, not really any particular series that made me think, oh yeah, this has pushed me to read avidly now. It was just kind of, it happened. There were certain books that I enjoyed reading, and then once I forced myself to start reading, it just became easier and easier, and yeah, it just kind of happened organically and naturally, I guess. Some of my favourite books that I've read most recently, though, include The Painted Man, the first book in the Demon Cycle series. Just about to start the final book in the series, so watch out for my review of that. And yeah, Purple Hibiscus, loved that book as well. Great Expectations, another very inspirational book, and one that I loved. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, another book as well that I loved. So yeah, all really, really great books, and they've just inspired me to carry on and keep reading. Colour Purple and The Bell Jar as well, 2 other books that I really, really love. So yeah. Question 6. What would you ask your favourite YouTuber? So what question would you ask your favourite YouTuber? To be honest, I don't really know. I only really kind of listen to what they say and tell me about books when I'm reading and doing other things. Sorry, when I'm cooking or cleaning or doing other things normally. So I don't think about it too much in terms of questions to ask. The only 2 booktubers who I watch religiously are Kitty G and Lauren from the Novel Lush. And yeah, just kind of consistently find that I have similar tastes with them, or that, even when my opinions differ, I like the explanations and justifications that they give. So yeah, I guess, to be honest, I would just ask them if they fancied a drink, and yeah, go and sit with them and get to know them in person, perhaps talk about books, but, find out if, what they're like outside of the virtual persona that they might present. Question 7. What challenges do you think would be the hardest to overcome? So I guess the obvious one is show my face on camera. Personally, I don't really feel the need to, because I watch Booktube whilst doing other things, cooking and cleaning, as I've mentioned. So I don't really see the need to see the person's face. They're talking about a book, so I don't really need to see them, in my view. And if it happens, if I become part of this great community and meet people online who have similar tastes or different tastes, and we can have discussions about books, that would be great. However, it's mainly a selfish thing that I'm here for. I'm here to give my opinions about books, and I do think it's a little odd when you form relationships with people who you may never meet in person. It's something that I'm not 100% comfortable with. So yeah, it's not something that I was ever planning on doing. However, the other day I was speaking with a friend from work, and she said she can't really respect someone's opinion or authority if they're not brave enough to show their face while they're giving that opinion. And it kind of, it did make me think, when people say something online, people often talk about how easy it is to react in some way and to post a comment, for example, being incredibly mean and nasty, yet you would never say it to someone's face, things like that. Obviously, my plan is never ever to be malicious. If there's a book that I don't like, I hope that I give a fair review and that I may make negative comments, because that's how I genuinely feel. I'm not trying to be malicious to the author. I'm not trying to make them feel bad. I'm certain they don't feel bad because they're almost certainly multimillionaires, and they get to write for a living, and I don't, so why do they care what I think? But either way, I never ever intend to simply be mean or nasty, and I hope that when I do say something that is negative, it is justified. But I can see where she's coming from, and I think we do live in a very visual world, and people do kind of want that sort of they want to see people to see if they can trust in them, kind of, or see that there's some sort of authority behind the opinions that they give in. So I may start showing my face. Currently, though, I don't feel any real need to. Question 8. Where and when do you read? So currently in my living room, I have a chair. At the moment, it's by the window. I try and rotate my furniture every 6 months or so, because supposedly it's stimulating for your brain. But I don't know if that's true. I just get bored, though. But yeah, it's currently by the window anyway. And I call it my reading chair, so I'll often read here. I do quite often read in bed as well, just because my flat's freezing, so that's a way to keep warm if I have my duvet around me. But I find I read most efficiently when I'm actually travelling. So I was on a plane to London a couple of weeks back, and I read about 200 pages. So I was, the flight's only an hour and a half. I was waiting at the airport a bit as well. But yeah, for me, that's a lot more than I would, kind of normally read. And I think the reason for that is that I'm actively doing something. So I'm traveling. I'm going from A to B. That is what I need to do. And there's nothing else that I can do at that time except read. So I feel like that gives me a justification for reading, whereas if I'm sitting in my flat, I can often be, although I do try to set aside time for reading and not feel guilty and feel like that is the time that I allow myself to do something that I enjoy and just get on and enjoy it. There's always little things, I might see some dust on the floor and think, oh, I should really hoover. I might see every single plate is dirty, so I should really do the washing up. And yeah, I don't ever feel guilty enough to do it. But it still, distracts me, and I might read at a slightly slower speed. So yeah, I find that I really enjoy reading whilst travelling. And touch wood, I rarely get travel sick. Sometimes I do, and then I just have to put my headphones on and either listen to an audiobook, or just music or something. But touch wood, on the whole, I'm quite fortunate that back and forth from work, I can get reading done, or on longer journeys, I tend to read quite a lot then. And I also tend to listen to either audiobooks or Booktube, but mostly audiobooks nowadays, whilst I'm cooking or cleaning. And I find that helps me get reading done as well. Question 9 then, what sort of books do you like to read? So part of the reason I started the channel is to find out what sort of books I like to read and think about it, see what books I have read, if there's any trends, etc. When I started reading, I initially thought I would like fantasy, because I always loved fantasy and mythology and magic and witches and wizards and everything as a child. But to be honest, a lot of the fantasy genre has let me down. I still do love fantasy, but just because you've written a book that happens to have magic and dragons and wizards and spells and pyrotechnic magic and elements and things like that. It just that's not good enough. That doesn't make it a good book. And I feel like there's a lot of fantasy authors who think that that is the case. So yeah, a lot of fantasy books that I've read have left a lot to be desired, but I do still keep trying, and there are some amazing fantasy series that I have absolutely loved out there. I also thought I would like YA because I've always, struggled with reading, and I thought YA would be, quite quick, simple, and easy to read. And I've read quite a few YA series, and most of them I've kind of strongly disliked, if not actively hated. And yeah, I think the only ones I could think of are Harry Potter, Miss Peregrine, Hunger Games is okay, and yeah, Strange the Dreamer. Those are the kind of 3 YA series that I liked. Hunger Games was alright as well. It wasn't, I wouldn't necessarily reread it or say it's absolutely amazing, but I get, it did what it did. Other YA, though, I've kind of actively disliked it. I guess Brian Selznick's books as well, they could be classed as YA, but they've got illustrations in, so to me, they're a separate category. But yeah, so it's something that I don't tend to like either, but I still, will give YA a try. And I thought classics would be the types of books that I liked least, because they were the ones that I was always, forced to read at school, and always found really difficult and found I couldn't get into them. But the books that have inspired me most, Great Expectations, The Bell Jar, 1984, I've loved all of them, and I find that on the whole, classics are kind of what I gravitate towards and what I tend to appreciate most. So they're obviously, classics for a reason. I'm just at a point in my life now where I can read them for pleasure and get something out of them. Whereas when I was at school, I either didn't, care about the themes in them or understand them, or, just didn't like being forced to read them. And couldn't go at my own pace. So yeah, I've kind of decided that whatever the genre, it doesn't actually matter. Again, I thought I wouldn't like thrillers. Absolutely loved Iron Pilgrim. So yeah, genre essentially is quite unimportant to me now. Basically, all I want out of a book is that there's a really well-developed character who has a unique voice, so I can get into their headspace. Then they have a well-developed world around them that I can imagine, even if that's our world. If the character is well-developed enough, I want to care about what then happens to them. So yes, then the plot has to be interesting. But I have to care about what's happening to the character in the plot. And then, yeah, if those two boxes are checked of the good, vivid characters and world and the sort of interesting things that happen to them within that, then I will think about the book more deeply. I'll appreciate the language that's used to write it. I'll appreciate any kind of literary techniques like foreshadowing, metaphor, symbolism, things like that. But it has to have the first 2 to kind of draw me in the first place. So yeah, that was a really long video, so apologies for rambling on as usual. But if anyone else has answers to those questions, I'd love to hear them. And as always, thanks for watching.